Chapter 5, Now for the Real Story. The Thompsons' trip home was uneventful, with most of the kids tired after their trip to the center and then with all the excitement as they left. They napped most of the way back to Uncle Rodney's house, all except for Jimmy. He couldn't sleep. He just kept thinking about the sphere and what Reevan had told him, and about the strange things that happened as they were leaving the center. Alex, Rodney, and Grandpa JJ talked most of the way back to Socorro. They talked about their jobs, and about things that were going on around the world. Alex talked about Rachel and what she was doing in Afghanistan. Rodney talked about his job and how it kept him on the road most of the week driving around New Mexico. He had been working the last 5 years for one of those big express delivery companies. Grandpa JJ spent most of the time just listening or sharing an occasional story about the past, or about the care center he was at, or about whatever came to his mind. He just loved to tell stories, Jimmy thought. But the one story he really wanted to hear about, Grandpa JJ hadn't shared for a while. It was the one story Jimmy was really curious about. And now, after all this, with finding the sphere and seeing the image of Reevan, it only heightened his curiosity. Grandpa JJ, said Jimmy, deciding it was time to interrupt the conversation. Can you tell me the story about how you and your friend found that plane crash years ago out at the old ranch? He asked. There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by encouragement from both Dad and Uncle Rodney to continue. Jimmy listened intently as Grandpa JJ gave his retelling of the story. For the first time ever, he became acutely aware of important details that were missing. He had the feeling as he listened, that he was not getting the complete and honest retelling of the story, but only a watered-down version. He was beginning to get the feeling that Grandpa JJ was leaving out some important details that he wished to be kept a secret. Jimmy would have been okay with that, if he felt that was all there was to it. But somehow, he had a feeling there was more to the story, more important details left out on purpose. But why, he wondered. Could it be something that his Grandpa JJ was too embarrassed to share with them, or did something tragic happen that day? Was there even a plane crash as Grandpa JJ had been telling all these years? Was there some terrible accident that killed Grandpa's friend? So many questions. Jimmy continued his patient listening until Grandpa JJ got to that one point where he always stopped before, or was interrupted for some reason. Grandpa. Are you sure it was an airplane that crashed, or was it really an alien spaceship? Asked Jimmy. After he said it, he wished he hadn't, but it just came out, and now it was too late to take it back. Grandpa just sat there, stunned it seemed. He sat staring off in the distance at the mountains with a blank expression on his face. Jimmy, don't speak to your Grandpa JJ like that, scolded Alex. No, it's okay, Alex, little Jimmy's right, said Grandpa JJ, glancing over at Jimmy, grinning slightly. He must know, but how? He wondered. Gathering his thoughts, Grandpa JJ continued, speaking softly so as not to wake up the rest of the kids in the back of the car. You're right, Jimmy, it wasn't an airplane that crashed out at the ranch, it was a spaceship, said Grandpa JJ, taking a deep breath and gazing out the window, as he continued. It's been over 60 years now that I've had to live with this. I am getting too old now not to tell someone what really happened. The three of you are probably going to think I'm crazy or that Grandpa's finally lost his mind for sure, but here it goes. The operations center had been turned into a buzz of activity as several large helicopters had landed outside the operations center, unloading crate after crate of electronic equipment and personnel. They were bringing in some equipment that Hunter had never seen before. There were about a dozen men and women in special uniforms carting in and unloading various electronic communications equipment, laptop computers, and what appeared to be satellite receivers as well. By the way they were working, he could tell they were well prepared for something like this, but what this was exactly Hunter wasn't quite sure, since no one had yet shared any specific information with him or any of his team. He had a hunch, but Hunter was not the sort of person who liked to rely on hunches. All his life he had been taught to take things at face value and not try to go thinking outside the box. Hunter and his team went back to work, continuing ere they left off before General Coulter's arrival at the center, as the new arrivals continued bringing in and setting up their equipment. Hunter, growing tired of waiting for any help from General Coulter, decided it was time to get some answers on his own. Hunter stood up nonchalantly from his computer and walked over to Drake's workstation and quietly pulled up a chair next to him. So, Drake, what were you saying earlier about hydrogen? Hunter whispered. Alice told us the transmission was at 1420 MHz, but I don't understand why that's so important. Hunter asked. Drake explained, keeping his voice low. The transmission was at 1420.4 MHz to be exact. It's the frequency of neutral hydrogen, which is like 1420.405, or something like that. Anyway, didn't you ever take a basic chemistry class? Drake gave a chastising look towards Hunter, who had a very confused look on his face. You've never heard of SETI before, have you? He asked. Hunter shook his head. SETI stand for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, Drake explained. Hunter nodded slightly. Oh yeah, those UFO nuts. Now I remember, said Hunter. Drake scowled at him. They're not UFO nuts, Hunter. SETI is a coordinated scientific effort to search for other intelligent life in the universe. They thoroughly searched all radio frequencies for an intelligent signal, but many of those who worked with SETI felt that the best chance of ever finding a contact signal sent from an intelligent species out there in the universe would be on the hydrogen frequency. So, you believe someone from within SETI set this all up? Hunter asked. Not a chance. Look over here, Drake pointed to his monitor. I've been looking carefully at the data transmission I saved earlier this afternoon and I found something interesting that I haven't shared yet with anyone. Drake heard a slight sigh from Hunter. I wasn't going to share it until I could be sure about it. Drake continued, lowering his voice, looking around to make sure they were alone. There were two signals sent out simultaneously. They were piggybacked on top of each other. One signal was in a strange code that I couldn't make out. The other signal, however, was one I am very familiar with, C language. Same language most of our computers around here use. In fact, I've been looking over some of the data that was sent. It's like a virtual encyclopedia of information on humanity, maps, geopolitical and historical data and so on. Drake paused and licked his lips. Hunter, whoever sent this signal, wanted us to know they sent it. That's my guess. And, he paused again. Get this, I am pretty sure the signal was sent locally. I did a triangulation of the recorded signals that we were processing from the antennas prior to all this happening, and it showed the origin of the signal was somewhere near this facility. He glanced up to see Hunter's expression, but heard a stern, but quiet female voice speaking from behind him. Why thank you, Mr. Drake and Mr. Hunter, that is very interesting to know. Gentlemen, there is one thing we need to make clear right now. We are all working as a team and we will share whatever information we find, got it? It was light. Colonel Schmidt standing behind Hunter and Drake. We got it, Colonel. Hunter and Drake replied in unison, feeling like two kids who just got caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Light. Colonel Karen Schmidt, but please just call me Karen, she insisted. Look, we're not here to harass or hassle you guys. We're here under orders to find out what happened and that's what we will do. We need your assistance and expertise to help in this. Can we count on your help? Schmidt held out a hand to Hunter and Drake, who looked at each other, and then each of them took her hand and shook it. Great, now, tell me again, what was it you were saying about the signal originating from within this facility? Schmidt asked. Hunter backed away from the workstation, offering Schmidt his seat. At first he wasn't sure, but now he was positive. There was something he liked about her. Maybe he could take her name off the list after all. When Grandpa JJ finished telling Alex and Rodney the story of how he and his friend Allen found the spaceship that had crashed, and how Allen had disappeared with the spaceship, there was a long, bewildered silence. A lot of questions began to flood through their minds. They really didn't know what to say. Luckily, for all of them, they were just about home. Seth, Bobby, and Leanne, who had been sleeping soundly in the back seats as soon as Uncle Rodney turned into the driveway up to the house. Well, Pop, I'm not sure what to say, but thanks for telling us your story. Rodney looked over at Alex, who was looking somewhat frustrated and confused about the whole thing. In fact, Jimmy seemed to be the only one who was okay with the story, which really surprised him. Hey boys, did everyone have a good time today? Marlene asked, strolling out from the front of the house. While they were unloading everything from the SUV, Rodney pulled Alex and aside as everyone else was heading into the house. "What do you think of Pop's story?" he whispered. "I'm not sure yet." Alex looked away, thinking. Either he's suffering from some early form of dementia, or he's delusional, or he paused. "What? You really think he might be telling the truth about discovering an alien spaceship?" "Come on, Alex." Rodney shook his head. "I think we better keep an eye on him and talk to Dr. Forster about this, that's what I think." Rodney was obviously growing more frustrated. He didn't even want to think about it anymore and walked into the house, leaving Alex alone with his thoughts. Nothing more was said about the conversation they had on the way home earlier in the afternoon. All were quiet for the remainder of the evening, as Marlene served dinner and then took the kids into the living room to set them all up with a movie for the evening. Grandpa JJ also seemed a lot quieter this evening than the evening before, foregoing the movie time to go to bed early. Alex decided it had, after all, been a busy day for all of them, and Pops had probably just gotten tired and needed the rest. He would have to sit down with him and have a talk with him in the morning. Alex was finishing putting things away in the kitchen as Marlene stepped in from the living room. "Hey Alex, Rodney and I are going out to the patio for a beer. Want to join us?" "Sure, be right there in a minute," Alex replied. "I'm going to check on Pop first for a second, and then I'll be out there." Alex walked back to the bedroom and cracked the door open an inch or two to see how Grandpa JJ was doing. As he looked in, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. There was Grandpa JJ crawling around the room on the floor with his head stuck underneath the sheets at the end of the bed. "Pop, are you okay?" Alex worriedly asked. "What? Oh, yeah. I'm fine, thanks." Alex obviously had startled him. "Are you looking for something? Maybe I can help?" "Oh no, I am fine. I don't understand though. I know I brought it with me. Tell me I didn't leave it down in Truth or Consequences?" Grandpa JJ mumbled to himself as he continued searching the floor around the bed. "Leave what?" Alex asked again. Now he was beginning to wonder if perhaps Rodney was right after all. Maybe Pop was suffering from some kind of mental illness that recently surfaced that no one noticed before. "Oh, nothing, just something I brought here with me, something I've been hanging on to for many years, a sort of good luck charm." JJ chuckled at that. "Here Pop, let me help you up." Alex reached down and offered a hand to Grandpa JJ to get him up off the floor and onto the bed. "Tell you what, get a good night's sleep and we'll look for it in the morning when the sun comes up, okay?" he offered. "Yep, you're right, I am sure it's here somewhere. It probably just fell off the bed when I was getting dressed earlier today." Grandpa JJ stood up and walked over to the side of the bed, reaching for his glasses and a book he had on the table. "Hey Pop, tell you what, after you get up in the morning let's go down to the workshop and work on that radio set that Rodney found. We'll try to get it working. Sound good to you?" Grandpa JJ nodded his head. "Yep, that sounds good, son. I think I am just going to read for a few minutes then go to sleep. By the way Alex, I had a great time today, thanks for taking me along. We should get little Jimmy down there to work on the radio too, he's a real smart kid, reminds me of his father." He glanced up from the book he started. "I know you and Rodney probably think your old grandpa's losing his mind, don't you?" Alex nodded hesitantly. "Well, somehow I will find a way to prove all this crazy stuff is true, somehow. Good night Alex." "Good night Pop." Alex turned and left the room, returning to the kitchen to grab a beer. Drake and Hunter had been working feverishly for the better part of the afternoon looking over the data records of the transmission, huddled over their computers, focusing their efforts at decoding the primary signal. The operations center had quieted down now that it was getting late, but there were also intense efforts going in the other corner of the center by the additional personnel to decode and decipher the signals. General Coulter had just returned to the center from his second helicopter trip this afternoon. "Man, how he gets around," thought Hunter. Hunter noticed Coulter making the rounds, carefully observing all the teams working within the operations center. He seemed to be trying to take in everything he could, like an animal stalking its prey, as if he was sizing up an enemy, whoever that might be. Then Coulter paused and stood still in the center of the room, taking a deep breath. Good evening, his voice boomed throughout the center. I want everyone to stop what they are doing and listen up. He bellowed and waited. In lieu of any formal staff meetings, here is how I've decided we are going to handle this. I've been handed 5 important missions for this team to accomplish in the next 24 hours from the National Security Advisor as well as the President of the United States. They are as follows. First mission, to determine the origin of the transmission. Second, we are to determine the content of the transmission. Third, we are to determine the intent of the transmission. Fourth, we are to determine the destination of the transmission, and finally, we are to find the person or persons responsible for all these transmissions and bring them in for questioning. If you need any equipment, material, or additional expertise, then you just ask me, and it will be brought, flown, or trucked to you. Everyone got it? He barked. Now, Drake and Hunter have already taken care of the first goal for us. By triangulating the data signals received earlier, they have determined the signal originated from within this facility. That brings us to the second goal. What is the content of the transmission? The more we can stick to facts, the better. However, I am welcoming any ideas you may have. As General Coulter finished, there was a stunned silence. Colonel Schmidt was the first to break the silence. General Sir, Mr. Drake has made an interesting discovery. Mr. Drake, would you share with everyone what you observed earlier this afternoon regarding the transmission signal? Schmidt asked. Drake began hesitantly, clearing his throat first. Well, General Coulter, it would seem that there were 2 simultaneous signals being sent out. One signal was shorter in length, but it was piggybacked on top of the secondary signal, which was longer. The shorter signal I've been trying to decode, but it is of a type of computer code that I've never seen before. The second signal was a standard C+ computer transmission, but at an extremely high compression, like nothing I've ever heard of before, about 2 terabytes a second. Drake heard a few whistles. Yeah, tell me about it. Even with our current technical ability, the fastest we could probably transmit wirelessly would be about a fraction of that speed. There was a moment of silence, then Drake continued. Also, both the signals were transmitted on a frequency of 1420.4 MHz, which may be significant. Drake added. Thank you, Mr. Drake, that is significant. Now, is there anyone who has any idea of the content of those transmissions? Coulter asked. Dr. Robertson spoke up. Well, General Coulter, we've been looking over the transmission data, and it seems that it is an extensive collection of historical, geological, political, and social data on Earth covering a time span of nearly 8,000 years. We're still in the process of looking it over, but there is an enormous amount of data here and it will take a while. Very well, said Coulter. What about the intent of this transmission? Anyone have any ideas? What exactly are you getting at when you say intent, General? Hunter asked. Are you seeing this as being some sort of malicious act, such as a terrorist attack or something like that? We are looking at everything, Mr. Hunter. Coulter emphasized. Nothing's ruled out. Alice Stevens decided to speak up. Well, General Coulter, that doesn't make any sense at all. Why would terrorists want to do something like this? Stevens continued. No one was killed by what happened, nothing was damaged or anything like that anywhere, right? She asked. Mumblings could be heard amongst the staff, mostly the regular staff members of the center. No, Miss Stevens, you are right. No one was killed or injured, but we must look at every possibility. Colonel Schmidt suggested. There is still that first signal that Drake mentioned, the one we can't decode that concerns us. Not to mention that the effects of this signal were not isolated to this facility only, but several other similar facilities in the Northern Hemisphere. Colonel Schmidt added. I think everyone is missing something important and obvious here. If I may interrupt, asked Dr. Robertson. General Coulter gave him a nod to continue. Whoever is responsible for this had to have access to technology beyond anything that we've seen before, anything man-made, that is. Has anyone thought of bringing in someone from SETI to be on this team? Robertson asked. Quiet at his workstation, Drake had been listening to everyone and suddenly had a moment where the proverbial light went on. Well. And this is pure speculation on my part, but maybe the signal was some type of alien communication signal. Drake suggested. Hunter looked at Drake with an expression of disbelief. What? Hunter asked, not hiding his disbelief. You can't be serious. It makes sense, if you think about it. Drake pleaded his case. They were using our own antenna system to send out a communication signal. Coulter and Hunter both had the same expression of disbelief on their faces. Well, Mr. Hunter, it seems today you may have had ET running around as a visitor? Colonel Schmidt added jokingly, holding her hand up to her face, making a hand phone, and mouthing the words, "Hone home." Hunter looked at Drake, and then he looked at Schmidt, then back to Drake again. Anger mixed with frustration was now showing on his face. As of this moment, if they weren't still on it, Drake and Schmidt just had their names put back on his list.
You've been listening to The Thompson Sphere by David E. Farmer, also now available on Amazon's Kindle. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more chapters coming soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.